joining us for another episode of the ASLA Emerging Professionals Committee Ask Me Anything events. We are so happy to have you with us for another event. These are becoming quite popular, and we're glad to bring them to you on behalf of ASLA. So today we have a very exciting guest that we're excited to present to you. We have with us Laura Solano from Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates. Laura is widely regarded as an expert in the field of landscape technology and sustainability, and her leadership and knowledge inform the design, construction, and post-construction maintenance of MVVA's projects. Her particular areas of expertise include the integration of biological management programs in planting design, the use of sustainable soils, and the utilization of all landscape materials. In collaboration with Matt Urbanski and Michael Van Valkenburg, Laura serves as a managing principal for planning and design projects from their earliest phases and oversees the technology aspects of MVVA's landscapes firm-wide. While her accomplishments are too extensive to list here, a few more worth noting are that Laura has been a lecturer at Harvard's GSD for 20 years. She's the Vice President of Finance for the Landscape Architecture Foundation, and she received her degree from The Ohio State University. So, Laura, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
We are very excited to start presenting you with a lot of questions. We've gotten quite a few in advance, and I think we've got some really good thought-provoking questions. Before we get into that, let me also welcome Chelsea Keith, one of the members of our committee and the outgoing student representative to the ASLA Board of Trustees. Chelsea, thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
All right, so without further ado, we're going to put you on the hot seat, Laura, and see what we can learn from you today. So let's start off with one of our core questions that those who've tuned in before know we always start off with 5 key questions. We're going to start off with those again today. So Laura, let's start with this. What is the best thing that you find about being a landscape architect?
I think the thing that I absolutely love is the ability to make things that affect so many people. I love the fact that people can walk in our projects and not know that they're in a design space, but they know that they are someplace special, and it makes them happy, hopefully.
Yes, I can say for certain that your spaces do make people happy. So let me go into this. Who or what has had the biggest impact on your career?
Well, for sure, Michael Van Valkenburg has, and he's nowhere within listening distance, so I can say this without feeling like I'm somehow kowtowing to him. But I can say that I started here after about 10 years worth of professional practice, and I've been at the firm for about 25 years or so. And Michael has challenged me and continues to challenge me to be the best that I can be, not only in terms of landscape architecture, but also I think as a person. You know, we all think that, well, we're not supposed to cross the barriers between sort of who you are personally and who you are professionally, but I think that that's kind of an impossible thing to do. And so I think that he's helped me to kind of set a standard of always reaching for something better and always being happy to continue to learn. I'll tell you a story about him that kind of summarizes, which is one day we were walking in Teardrop Park not long after it was constructed, and we were walking with an architect who sort of stopped us and said, "Wow, this is a beautiful park. I guess that you've kind of reached the pinnacle." And Michael practically choked and said, "Are you kidding me? I'm just getting going." So I feel like he's always said that to us. I'm just getting going. And it's something that's translated for me really well.
All right. Let's go over to Chelsea for a question.
So, if you were given a golden ticket to visit any landscape tomorrow, what would it be?
That would be Parc Sceaux in France by Lenotre, because I've read about it for years. Everyone who's ever been there has always come back with incredible reviews of it, and it's one of Lenotre's less known landscapes, and so I also like that. The scale is much different than his other work. He did it when he was late in his career, and so you see mature ideas that aren't necessarily so boastful as a place like Versailles is. So, should I pack my bags?
Yeah. Do you have an extra ticket? That sounds great. I want to go along. I'm going to add that to my list for sure. So we'll get you that golden ticket in the mail very soon. Chelsea, you have another one?
So what is the one thing you wish you could tell your younger landscape architect self?
Relax, and you have the capacity to figure out much more than you realize you do. But in order to take advantage of that, you need to relax, and you need to not worry about the small stuff, worry about the big stuff.
Great.
That's a really good point. So Daniel, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm going to take one that has just come in from one of our viewers and answer theirs live here. This came from Hannah. She said, do you see opportunities related to landscape architecture for professionals who are knowledgeable about plants and design but are without an LA degree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, plants are one of the backbones of our profession, and we have people in the firm that specialize is really the wrong word, but they have an instinct for plants, and regardless of what their background is, if they understand the physical characteristics, the potential to use various plants in design, they understand plant communities, what plants do, what they need, you're valuable. And you would be valuable to any number of firms, because even though, you know, we're landscape architects, I'd say it's one of the areas that we actually are the weakest in. The thing that people know the least about, oddly.
And did I see in looking at your bio that you have an undergrad in botany? Is that correct?
I don't have an undergrad. I studied botany, and then in my third year, at the end of my third year, I decided to study landscape architecture. But I was studying, well, I was doing research with the USDA on crops for third world countries. So not exactly what I do now. Now I just work in a third world firm.
And so how did you find your way to landscape architecture? What brought along that transition?
I had a friend who was an architect, and I was always interested in what he was doing and the culture of studio, which I found fascinating. And I started looking at architecture books, and then one day I discovered Luis Barragan, who is not a landscape architect, but an architect and civil engineer. And I looked at his work and I said, oh my God, somebody designs the outside? I just had no notion that that was even possible. And then I was just swept off my feet. I couldn't think about anything else.
That's Similar story that you hear from a lot of people. It's interesting as we travel, the work that this committee does, we visit a lot of school programs, and listening to people's stories about how they found their way into landscape architecture is always very interesting, because there are so many different paths to get to it, and so many paths to take once you're in it as well.
But they all share the same thing, which is people feel passionate about it, I think. It's rare to find somebody who just sort of stumbled into it.
True. I agree with that. Chelsea, you are up.
Yeah, so at one point did MVA transition from doing smaller residential to larger public work, and what facilitated that change?
Oh, that's such a presumptive question, because we still do residential work. That is how the firm began, but I can tell you that to this day we still do residential work. It always disappoints me to find that people think that we do very large projects exclusively. We don't. It's maybe a third of our work, and maybe 10 or 20% is in residential work, and then the rest of it is all different scales. But I'd like to put a plug in for residential work. We use it to, because you get to do things very quickly, right? You get to see things built very quickly. And, you know, we believe that if you can figure out what makes a garden successful, you know, the human comfort, the atmosphere, the spatial qualities of it, then you can take that information and apply it to almost any scale work. Because in the end, landscapes are, you know, really at a personal scale. That's how people experience them. And so, you know, that's how we all experience our homes and, you know, our landscapes. And so it's also valuable because Michael uses those to work with interns and juniors in the firm, so that he has an active way to mentor people. So we haven't stopped.
Recently, within the last couple months, there was a very beautiful residential project in Brooklyn from your firm that was on the cover of Landscape Architecture magazine. So it was cool to see that diversity. You're talking about the small, very small scale projects. All right, we have another live viewer question. Let's go straight to that. What is the office structure like at MVVA? You manage the Cambridge office, correct? Does the Cambridge office operate almost independently of the Brooklyn office? Do you have small teams within the firm, or is it all fluid and open? A lot of small questions in there. Hopefully you got all that.
Well, the firm began in Cambridge about 34 years ago or so, and in 2000 we opened up the Brooklyn office, and it was somewhat a conscious decision, but it was really more of a personal decision because Michael's daughter lived in New York City, and so he wanted to be closer to her, and he was at the ripe age of 50, so he decided that if he was going to make a change, it was the time to do that. But one of the things that we all agreed to before the firm was opened in New York is that we were going to make sure that both offices kept up standards, that we had the same kind of dedication to design. We never wanted anybody to say, oh, the Cambridge office did that project and the New York office did that project. And so the thing that we've worked really hard at is trying to keep the cultures the same. Now, they're not the same in the sense that they each have their own personalities. And that's important, right? It's just like having a brother and a sister. They're from the same, they're spawned from the same parents, but they're completely different than each other. But we work on projects together. So not every talent is in every office, and so we try to capitalize on that by having things go back and forth between the offices. Right now, we're working on, the Cambridge office is working with the New York office on the construction of the St. Louis Arch project, and that's happened for about 3 years or so. So we try to, keep them the same. I mean, with modern, it's not really modern technology anymore, right? It's technology. With technology, it makes it pretty easy because you can jump on go-to meetings and, email, and we have extensions where you just dial 3 numbers and you can reach somebody in New York, and people go back and forth, and the principals certainly go back and forth so that you start to know people. And sometimes, each of us is called in as a consultant, I guess, on another project. So I know a lot of what's going on in New York, and the principals there know a lot of what's going on here as well. So we're hoping that it doesn't ever appear like we're 2 offices.
Great. With technology, as you mentioned, making the world smaller, are you guys doing much international work?
No, we try to keep our hands off of that altogether. We've done projects in Korea and in France, and we do work in Canada as well as Mexico. But in general, we try to stay in North America. And that is simply because we've learned in our few forays into foreign work that the culture is different about how projects get done. And for us, design never ends, including probably annoyingly in the construction phase as well. And so in foreign countries, you often get to be the design landscape architect, but not the one that sees it through. And for us, that's really important. So we don't think we'd get the same quality work if we allowed that to happen.
Right. All right, Chelsea.
Okay, this question comes from Meredith, and she wants to know how important is it when you're going through school to get out and find a niche rather than being well-rounded?
Wow, that's a really hard question. I mean, I think that I would take school as an opportunity to try as many things as you can, simply because when you begin your career, you don't know what you're good at. You don't know what you might succeed at, because inside all of us is, our characteristics and traits and interests kind of waiting to come out. And you never know what's going to spark that. However, I will say that when you get in an office, it's still important to stay well-rounded. I really believe that. But you will probably find that you are better at some things than others. And that shouldn't be limiting, but it's, it's sort of like admitting that you can play tennis, but you really can't do team sports. You have to be honest with yourself. And there's not a judgment there. It's just different. So I would take school and just like learn everything that you can, and then sort it out later.
Great advice.
That's a great point. Daniel?
All right, we're going to take another viewer question, and let me remind all of our viewers, if you have questions, you can use the Hangout app to just put them in there, and we will jump on them as soon as we can. All right, let's take, this is from Tony Lee. In recent years, we have seen radical transitions in terms of business model and structure in other industries. Which aspect of our professional practice and business model should be further studied, researched, and innovated?
How about just the aspect of being good business people, period? Because designers are notorious for not making good business decisions or for underpricing themselves. So I think the thing that we need, a place we need to mature in the business aspects of our projects is that we need to set a fair price for our work. I think a lot of us are underpaid in the services that we bring, but we also need to make sure that we're known in the business community, because we're one of those professions that is really not that well known. And so I think kind of, putting ourselves out in the public realm more would help that. But, on the other hand, I'll say that a design business is really unique because you are selling creativity. And every industry has creativity, but very few of them are so drastically on display, waiting to be judged. And for landscape architects, we also have the dilemma of, when we are done with a project, the project is actually just beginning. The product really hasn't been delivered. The product doesn't come for many, many years. And so it's tricky. Like, imagine if when you bought a car, it was the size of a domino, and over the years it grew. You have to make sure that as it scales up, that it's still works, still operable, still looks good. So we're in a funny industry, but Tony, if you've got a good answer for that, I'd love it.
It's one thing, landscape architects in general are some of the best people you can ever meet. They're collaborative, they're friendly, but they could probably stand to be a little more egotistical, I think is to be a little more proud and broadcast what they're doing and show it off a little more, I think is kind of what you're saying.
Well, no, actually, I'm not talking about egotistical, because that actually burns up a lot of energy that you need otherwise, I think. I think it's more about being confident and having the ability to show leadership in what you do. You don't have to be an expert in every aspect of design or every discipline of design, but you better know enough about landscape architecture in all of its forms to be able to present yourself competently. And that's where landscape architects fall down, I feel.
Gotcha. All right, Chelsea, you are up.
So can you describe your process? Like, do you start with doodles on a napkin, or where do you begin?
Well, you begin with the site, right? Because every site is very unique. Beth Meyer from the University of Virginia has this really great saying, which is that land isn't sitting around waiting to have architecture built on it. It is what it is, whether or not anybody or anything shows up. And so as landscape architects, you have to start with the site. What is this? What are the ephemeral qualities of it? What are the physical qualities? Where does the water go? Are there any soils that you can use? What's next to it? Where's the bad view? Where's the good view? And so you start there, and then from there the site kind of tells you something, and you have to very quickly get all your crappy ideas out on paper so that you can get to your good ideas, because everybody does crappy stuff at first, right? There's not some genius that's emanating from you, and all you have to do is go back and find that one gesture that you did in the beginning. It's an accumulation of things. It's letting yourself be really open and open to other people providing inspiration and ideas as well. So, and it never stops. It just never, ever stops.
That brings us to one of our 5 questions that we jumped ahead of. The famous debate between hand drawing and computer graphics. Where do you fall on that one?
Well, I think hand drawing, and not because of my age, but because I think that there's something unique about brain, hand, eye all working together. And I think something is a little lost, and you can't bring a computer up to my desk and talk to me about something that's on the screen. Even if you prefer to do everything in a computer, you still need to print it so that we can look at it and hand draw on top of it. And it's a skill that we see diminishing more and more and more. Many people, I used to spend, this is going to sound like grandma and grandpa stories, but we used to spend hours and hours perfecting our handwriting, and nobody has to do that anymore. Even my own daughter can't do cursive, which just horrifies me, but that's the way of the world. But I think that you need to have the ability to draw. It's an essential part of the creative process, no matter what field you're in.
All right, Chelsea.
So that leads into our next question, which are there any skills or traits you feel it's essential for a landscape architect to have?
Well, ask it again. Skills or characteristics? What did you say?
Skills or traits that a landscape architect should have.
Okay, skills or traits. Well, I'll start with traits because that's actually more interesting. Skills are something that you acquire. Traits you arrive with and develop over time. So I think the traits you have to have are patience, a bit of humility combined with hubris. You have to be open and joyful, because I think landscapes are one of the most astonishing things in the world. No matter whether or not they're cultivated or they're natural, they are always inspiring. And I think you need to see the joy in them in order to produce them, in order to get at the essence of what they are. And then skills, I'll put it another way. There are basic skills, right? Plants, topography, technical, aspects. But the truth is, the thing you need to do the most when you go into a firm is be honest about what you do and don't know, so that you can learn it, so that you don't have to waste time pretending that you know something that you don't. You'll learn faster if you do that.
I love the way you just separated skills and traits. That's really an answer. Things that you learn and things that you are kind of separated.
Yeah.
What you ended on there kind of leads into our next question from a viewer. What's the most effective way for a young professional to seek a mentor within an office if that is not built into the office culture? Someone that can help them learn those skills.
That's a tough one. I wouldn't say that we have a normal mentoring process here. I think you can learn a lot by absorption, and then kind of picking out a mentor for different aspects of your career and your interests. So if you're really interested in plants, there's going to be somebody who's quite good at plants within the office. I don't think you can do, because of the complexity of landscape architecture, I don't think you can do one-stop shopping for mentors. I think you kind of need to work around that. I always chuckle when I see people that used to work for us years ago who say to me finally, "Oh, I learned a lot from you by listening to how you spoke on the phone," which just one tells me I was loud and probably, forceful about something or cowering, but they learn a lot. And so for all you people out there who keep your headphones in, just take one of them out so you can hear what's going on around you. But you know, and change mentors over time. You don't want one person's view of everything. It just doesn't work that way.
All right, Chelsea. Oh, I think Chelsea's muted. I'll throw it out there. Okay, at what point did you feel like, or did you notice yourself really hitting your stride as a designer, where you felt as though you had a niche either in your company or the field of landscape architecture overall, and how do you think you got to that point?
I'd say it's been about 10 years or so. So it only took me 25 to feel that way. So I think I'm doing okay. Everybody says that, you really can't be a great designer until you hit 50. And so that would put me on that program. It was about when I was 50 that I really felt like, let me put it another way. I felt like I knew something, and that what I knew would stick with me, and that I could make more space to learn more, that I wasn't going to lose whatever it was that I'd learned. But a lot of that also had to do with just feeling more settled in life in general. It's hard to feel that way in your 20s and 30s because you're not. You're just not. So that helps.
All right. Here's another viewer question that just came in. What is an underutilized resource in our field?
Underutilized resource. History. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I don't think that people take the time to kind of learn about the sites they're working on, learn about the era that something was developed and the circumstances that surround it, because that's what we're all influenced by, right? By history. So that's my mom answer. And I guess another answer might be that I think that people actually don't stretch themselves enough with technology. I think that people get comfortable with something and then they don't necessarily reach beyond it. And I'm talking both about technology from computers to also finding and following and trying technological developments that can be employed in the field and that can be employed to make jobs better.
All right. I think Chelsea is back with us.
Yes, I am. Thank you. So this question comes from Amy, and she wants to know, at what point in your career did you begin to see yourself as a firm leader, and what do you think led to your biggest promotions?
I'm bossy. I think that people worry a lot about promotions, and they worry a lot about, people worry about money, and they worry about promotions, and am I going to get ahead? And I never really worried about that. I just tried to do my job well because I loved landscape architecture. And I think there's a lot of points that come from just being enthusiastic and always, willing to, give as much of yourself as you possibly can. I think what's harder to do than to kind of reach some place where you've been recognized, as having particular abilities to lead something, I think it's much harder to sustain that. It's harder to make sure that you continue to be a leader who grows and who can bring something to the discussion. Because it's easy to kind of, phone it in once you've reached a particular place. And so you have to be the kind of person, I think, that's dissatisfied with status quo. And it's hard. I've been through periods in my career where I haven't felt that. I haven't always, felt like I could lead. And it's okay to feel that way. You just got to figure out why you do and then fix it. So,
when you got started off, was there anything that surprised you in daily practice? And then is there anything that still surprises you in daily practice?
When I started out, I think what surprised me was I think I thought that there were roles like, oh, you're the designer, you're the technical person, you're good at graphics. And I found that actually you need to be conversant in all of those things, and then you can kind of be better at some than others. But I also, when you come out of school, you're working on projects by yourself. And one of the greatest kind of realizations, it's not so much a surprise as it is a realization that you have to collaborate, like truly collaborate, like be willing to say, I'm wrong, you're right, that's better, thanks for telling me that, and do it enthusiastically. Just the other day I was really hurt by what an architect said to me. And I called Michael up and I said, you have to give me some insight on this person. I knew that he knew him. And he went through, what he knew. And, in the end he said, well, he's really a good guy. He's just really a good guy. So I had to back down and, kind of unknot my own rope and relax. And it got better. It got better. What was the other part of your question?
Is there anything today that still surprises you, Dave?
Everything. Everything surprises me. Every day I have a surprise. Really, I do.
It makes work enjoyable and interesting.
I've never been bored one day of my career, ever.
That's a good place to be. All right, Chelsea.
So, what is the most common problem you face when dealing with other professionals?
Ugh. Lack of respect. Lack of respect. Yeah.
How about when dealing with clients?
Clients are tough, but they're supposed to be in a way, and I kind of think it's in your hands to decide how tough they're going to treat you. In other words, if you take really good care of them and you prove your worth, they're generally pretty good. They may not be, warm and fuzzy, but they won't bust your chops typically. But it's hard to be a leader in landscape architecture when so many architects, for instance, don't really get what you do. And there's still, it still happens that architects want to take over our designs or, know more than you do, or insist that you can, why can't you get me a plant that can grow in a 3 by 3 by 3 foot deep, tree pit? Why can't you do that? So it's insulting sometimes, and I think that we're partially responsible for that because I think that historically landscape architects haven't shown enough design leadership to kind of set their place at the table and stay there for, through all the courses that are being served. It's tricky. We tend to try to be polite you know, and kind, and, you know, and that's just like crap. You can't do that because you'll be taken advantage of. People say to me, well, you know, your firm is well known, and I'll bet you never have to, you know, prove yourself. And the truth is, day after day after day, we have to prove ourselves. Though we've solved some of our problems by only doing about 20% of our work with architects. From a very early stage in the firm, we always sought out and still seek out work where we can be the prime consultant. So on those bigger jobs that you see, we certainly do that. But also we have a business strategy, which is to see if we can be directly contracted with the client. Because one of the things that happens when you're not the leader of the team is that you kind of have a screen between you and the client. You can't get to the client without going through somebody else. And so, for instance, at the George W. Bush Presidential Center, we insisted on having a contract directly with the foundation. And, you know, we're still collaborative, but, you know, we get to talk to Laura Bush, too.
Mm-hmm. Some of what you touched on there leads right into another question we have here. With landscape architecture growing in popularity within design and construction industry, what factors do you think play into this, and what can LAs do to relay the importance of our services to policymakers and potential clients? So how do we get that word out there that we should be recognized?
You know, anybody who's studying now is really lucky, because landscapes are relevant. They're real. For the first time that I can remember, they are relevant to everybody, not just, you know, somebody who can afford to have a landscape design for them. We're relevant because, you know, the environment, which is a horrible, horrible trouble, truly, needs people who understand the systems that make it up. And we, I think, are uniquely qualified, or we can make ourselves uniquely qualified to start to address some of those bigger issues. But we can't do that if we don't educate ourselves in very complex things. Like, I know more about soil and more about stormwater management and quality than I ever imagined I would. But by doing that, I can speak with authority about those topics. And so I'm not just the person who knows flowers. But, you know, landscapes have also, I can't remember a time in modern history where something like what happened in New York when Bloomberg became mayor happened, which is he set a goal that he wanted every single person in New York to live within 12 minutes walking to a park. Now that's phenomenal about what it means, the value of landscapes in people's everyday lives, and we have to capitalize on that. And you know, we have generations of people who love to spend time outdoors more than, you know, when I was a kid. You hear people complain about, you know, how kids only look at their iPhones, and you know, and there is some of that, but you know what, there are a lot of people who love to be outdoors and who need to be outdoors, and who need that to be a high quality of life. And in order to provide that, you have to know a lot about how ecologies work and how systems work, and you have to know what's beautiful, and you have to know what's techie nerdy so that it can stay beautiful. So I think that landscape architecture is relevant on all different levels in ways that it hasn't been before. You know, in policy making, in environment, and in appreciation of nature, in the psychological effect that it has on people. So it's never been more relevant, I think.
Agreed. Chelsea.
Okay, so what skill, and this is kind of similar to another question we have, but what skill and or characteristic have you been found is the most valuable behind the scenes for you to have a successful career?
Humor, for sure, because it's really important to have fun, but also to be, well, I guess that maybe they're hand in hand. The ability to find humor in a lot of the ridiculousness of life and things that happen around the office or with projects, and then knowing when to switch to being serious and insisting that something be done to its the best level that it can be. So it's, I think, kind of batting back and forth between those has been the most valuable for me personally. But everybody's got to find their own, their own way to do those things.
All right, I want to get this one in before we run out of time. What's the most memorable project you've worked on, good or bad? Or both, if you want to answer both.
Okay, probably one of the most memorable was Teardrop Park, which is now ancient. It was done about 13 years ago, but my learning curve was so high on that, and I got beaten up a lot on that job. But I have carried those lessons forward to this day, and I'm so happy for the beating. And then the worst job I've ever had was, I can't say too much about it, but it was with an architect who was always blaming me for mistakes that weren't mine. And I just had to suck it up and, play the game for a while. But I never worked with that architect again, ever. So that was the punishment.
And out of your projects, what's the most memorable response you've ever had to one of them from someone?
Well, I once was on a plane coming back from New York, and I sat next to a fellow who saw I was reading. Are we echoing? Can you hear an echo?
Yeah, just a little bit, yeah.
Me too. So I was sitting next to a fellow on a plane. I was reading a book because I was giving a lecture on something. And he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a landscape architect." And he said, "Oh, I have a great hint for you. There is this fabulous park in Battery Park City. You have to see it. It's so exciting. It's so beautiful. It's brand new. You have to go see it. It's called Teardrop Park." And I was just blown away at this fellow's kind of unbridled, unsolicited enthusiasm about a landscape. And when I told him that I'd worked on this project, he treated me like a rock star. He gave me his peanuts and, let me keep the window open so I could look out. And, so there's lots of great perks with our jobs.
That's great. All right, Chelsea.
Okay, this question comes from Jane, and she says, for the journey between entry level to managing projects, can you give some tips about what to listen in or key into while working in the firm, or tips about how to begin communicating with clients and architects, project team members?
Well, I think that in the beginning, you just have to listen. But I think very soon after that, if you haven't been invited to go to meetings and you haven't been invited in on phone conferences, for instance, you should ask. You should ask for that, because even if you don't say much at those, you learn so much. And you can make yourself useful. You can be the, you should be the person who takes notes, who kind of looks around at the room and tries to read it so that you can report to somebody later, what somebody's body language was. Because, working on projects isn't about the project itself. It's really about the making of it and everything that has to go into it. So you have to be a little pushy.
Pushy and bossy, that keeps coming up.
Yeah. Ask my husband.
All right, we've got a question from Amy. What do you hope that the next generation of landscape architects does after you and your peers are retired?
Oh, I think about that a lot. I hope that you take the world by storm. Honestly, I hope that you continue to advocate for our profession and help people understand the inherent value of landscapes in everyday life and the protection of those landscapes that are naturally occurring. I think that the next generation, has to concentrate on bigger issues more than any other generation has in the past. Clean water, air, and we need to sometimes work on the bigger question and sometimes make sure it's infused in our projects so that we can each add a drop to the bucket and help it get filled.
Mm-hmm. Following up with that, recently the LAF, which we mentioned you are a vice president of, had a big summit in Philadelphia to look at the declaration for the next 50 years. What was your biggest takeaway from that summit and that event?
That we have a lot of smart people in our profession, really smart people in our profession, and that that we have a common love of landscapes, and that we understand some of the really serious issues facing us. I found that summit to be really empowering, and I loved sitting in a hall for several days with 700 other landscape architects and lovers of landscapes. It was fascinating. You go to a lecture and you hear one person talk, but to hear a whole series of people talk was really enlightening because you could compare things much more easily.
Yes. Yeah, it was a phenomenal event. Chelsea, I think we've got time for a couple more. Do you have one?
So this question comes from Hannah, and she wants to know, being a woman, have you faced any particular challenges in your work?
Oh boy, yeah, all the time. Yeah, all the time. And the easiest place to get over it is on construction sites, because if you're just knowledgeable, right, and you are confident, then people really care, most about getting something done, right? They have to build something or they have to make something, and the more decisive you can be and the more that you understand, the allied issues that come into that are important. And, in every other aspect, it's more of a struggle, quite frankly. I remember Martha Schwartz once said to me that she always liked to have a man come with her to meetings, not because she couldn't run the meetings, but because it put people at ease to know that there was a man there, which I just found astounding, right? I mean, Martha is probably one of the toughest broads that I know, and yet she felt that way. So, you know, you kind of have to ignore it as much as you can and persevere. But on the other hand, you can't be insensitive as a woman. You can't be insensitive to the fact that we still face these issues. And so, you know, the best way to fight it is just to be as good as you can be, right? To read between the lines and not let people get away with bad behavior.
That's a great point. Thank you. Daniel?
So we've heard about a lot of projects today, things you've worked on, things you enjoyed, things you didn't. But what would be your dream project? What's the big fish?
Dream project. I don't know. I kind of like everything I do, even when it's awful. You know, I'll put it this way. I love doing things that are related to public use. Even though we do residential work, and I'm always happy to contribute, it makes me the least happy to work on those because I just don't like doing a project for a couple of people. I'm always interested in the unwashed masses, you know, and bringing them something. So that's not a very good answer, but true.
All right, I think we have time for one more, so we will ask you, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I guess it would be to respect yourself, to carry yourself, even when you don't feel confident, to carry yourself in a respectful way. Because you are, you're more likely to be generous if you respect yourself, and more likely to, you know, forgive others their trespasses. And you know, if you practice it like day to day, it's like exercise. After a while, you notice that you feel differently. So it's hard to do, right? Because you can feel kicked in the gut sometimes. But so that would be the best advice.
That's excellent advice.
Yeah, it's very poignant, and I appreciate it as well.
All right. Well, we are nearing the end of the hour. Laura, do you have any last-minute parting words or wisdom you want to share?
I'm so excited that people are, you know, that people are finding landscape architecture, and that we have such a bright group of people. I mean, I lecture a lot at different universities, and, you know, I teach at Harvard, and people around, you know, people of all flavors can contribute to the profession, and I think that there's a diversity that's starting to build. Not enough, not nearly enough, but we're starting to see that. And I'm just excited for everybody who's in a program now, or who's starting out their career. I'm just so excited for them to get on board and bring what they can bring to the advancement of not only the profession, but the world, you know, the world.
Excellent. Well, we are so thankful for your time today and for your openness and your willingness to share with the students and emerging professionals on behalf of ASLA. And thank you to all of you who joined us today and viewed this. Make sure you let all of your friends and colleagues know that this is available on YouTube, or through the Hangout app. They can go back and listen and watch and learn from Laura and her wisdom and years of experience. And want to remind you that next month we will be back with our guest Gina Ford from Sasaki, and following that in September, David Rubin from Land Collective. So a couple great ones coming up, and we'll keep you informed as more get on the calendar. Thank you so much for joining us again, and everybody have a great day.